What's the next playable class you think we'll get after Tech Marine? All right, so obviously the chances of us getting a new class after Tech Marine probably still pretty low. However, I did want to cover this because considering that little hint the devs put in, considering another anniversary event, effectively saying, hey, we could have a year 3. They said, they're not obviously going to confirm anything, but yeah, putting that little snippet in the community update mentioning, hey, you know what, it would be cool to have another anniversary event, wink wink. Okay, so with that, I figured, hey, you know what, fine, let's speculate. What if they do a year 3 new class? Now, if that is the case, obviously that would be the second class they would add into the game. The first new class will be the Tech Marine. We've already showed off the perks for that, and yes, the Tech Marine looks very, very good and fun, which is great. It's designed well, at least from the leaked perks that we saw. Anyway, as far as a second class goes in this game, I will admit, a lot of people have been suggesting Chaplain, and I'm just not down. I'm not down to play as Leandros for 2 reasons. One, for the obvious one, he's kind of a stick in the mud, essentially. But no, the main reason, the second reason here, is lore, essentially, for the game itself. Not so much as Warhammer 40k lore, even though I'm pretty sure, each chapter has 1 chaplain. But still, having Leandros at the operation, at the operation missions, probably isn't very lore accurate as far as the actual Space Marine 2 story goes. I'm pretty sure Leandros wasn't there when we were fighting the Hive Tyrant. But okay, so obviously when it comes to new classes, I do think, dude, yeah, they keep showing Terminators too. Yeah, this is why we're talking about this, because there's no way I made an entire video talking about how there's no shot we're getting a Terminator for a class in this game. It's first of all, it's probably just too slow, and then B, too powerful. But I mean, it does look cool, I will admit. Anyway, oh, that's the Judicar, right? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But yeah, that's the acceptable version of a chaplain. I think that's probably what the devs would do if they decided to do something like that. Terminator's no shot. Obviously, Leandros. Let's not see Leandros in any missions. Dude, I would not want to see Leandros voice lines, bro. He would just be sitting there complaining about Titus the entire time. But okay, yeah, let's go into the meat of this post, see what they're cooking here, because they do have a nice detailed definition of these classes. Greetings, brothers. I come asking the age-old question: what will be the next class in Space Marine 2 after the Tech Marine, of course? The first 3 all have a chance of being added next, in my opinion. The Chaplain, the Librarian, the Apothecary. The Chaplain would likely be a buffing unit, his ability likely being an AoE damage buff for nearby allies. He'd probably only get melee weapons and a pistol, likely giving him exclusive Arcanum Crozius as a class-exclusive melee weapon. Arcanum Crozius. Interesting. Never seen that. Never seen anybody really mention the name for what the Chaplain's weapons would be. But yes, him being an Anthem-based class would be great. I would love to see that. The Librarian would probably be a damage-focused class. Yeah, definitely. His ability being some sort of multi-use smite attack that has multiple charges, like the Assault's jump pack. I'd imagine he can only use melee weapons and pistols, but he has a psychic range attack that builds up a meter as he uses it, similar to a heating system. If he overheats it, he takes direct health damage. All right, so the Librarian, I do like the way they cook this. I think they have a great idea for the Librarian. A little bit of risk and reward definitely makes a lot of sense. However, dude, to be honest, the last time we talked about the Librarian, we mentioned that it's probably too powerful. And same thing with the Terminators, I guess. Terminators functionally might go against how the game works. If they seriously can't walk through a level in a good speed, that's definitely going to be rough. However, Librarians are definitely one of those classes that people mentioned they might just be too powerful also, which is, definitely unfortunate because Librarians are pretty cool. The thing with the Librarian would be, you have to consider, the 3 Space Marines we have in this game, well, the 6, but yeah, the 3 took down a Vortex Beast. That's honestly pretty insane. that is pretty insane as far as I know. I've seen a lot of people mention that's probably impossible. However, considering that scale, perhaps the librarian isn't as overpowered as I previously thought. The apothecary is another buffing class. His ability either to give his squad mates a small chunk of health or possibly give them a big amount of contested health. He'd probably be able to use primary weapons, but a more limited arsenal than the tactical, and he could even possibly have his reductor pistol as a unique sidearm, dealing massive single-shot damage to close-range foes. I mean, it sounds like the Inferno pistol, doesn't it? That's the one thing about when people suggest items or new weapons. You got to consider other weapons in the game and how they could be functionally similar. But hey, you know what? Still sounds pretty cool. The Terminator is a tricky unit to design. Yeah, obviously. This is why it's not going to happen, man. Dude, if they added a Terminator, Straybon would feel pretty insecure, in my opinion. He would be the heavy class who's just not as heavy as the heaviest class. It doesn't make any sense. As he has a much different arsenal to the usual Primus range, maybe as a compensation for the possibility of heavier weaponry and a melee weapon, he has no secondary and cannot roll. I mean, dude, honestly, if that was the case, I mean, I still don't think they're going to add that, but if that was the case, if that was the only drawback, I'd say that's fine. But yeah, as far as I know, I'm pretty sure they're slow. Maybe he can't be stunned, knocked back by heavy attacks. Yes, he's already overpowered. He's already too strong, even in this theoretical situation. And finally, the Judicar. While being the least likely, in my opinion, due to their muteness and therefore lack of interaction with squad mates, well, actually, that sounds pretty good, to be honest, for a new class. That means they have less to really prepare, I guess. His kit keeps him from being ruled out as a possibility. His ability would be his Temper Mortis, an archaeotech device that freezes enemies in place for a short duration. Dude, we do kind of need that. That is actually great. That would totally work out. Imagine freezing enemies in place, dropping down concentrated fire, like the tactical scan. That sounds perfect, because then they can't move out of the scan, and they're frozen, and they're taking extra damage. That'd be great. He'd likely have all the weapon options that the Bulwark already has, although they may give him his Executioner Relic Blade as a unique melee weapon that acts as a heavier power sword. Yeah, this would be a great moment for two-handed weapons. Anyways, what do you guys think, and who of these do you think is most likely to be in the game? Most likely Apothecary. However, I have to admit, I do think the devs are starting to steer away from the Apothecary. If they're going to add in a new class, I mean, honestly, if it's not the Apothecary, obviously it's probably not going to be Terminator. It's not going to be Leandros. It could be a Librarian, but like at the same time, I don't know. That would be pretty interesting if they were able to pull that off. I actually think that Judicar is probably a lot more, it's probably a lot more likely. At the very least, with how they detailed it out here in this post. It's just less work because they're mute. I mean, they can do grunts. That would be kind of cool. Something like that, I actually kind of like that personality mix-up. If we just added somebody in the group that might make Decimus a little uncomfortable, that would be kind of funny. But yeah, okay, so yeah, and I do like the idea of the two-handed sword, like 100%. But yeah, again, I'm not too sure how it would look, but I do think if they weren't going to do a chaplain because of Leandros, the Judicar is probably the best case, right? We're not going to get another class after the Tech Marine. It's not scheduled for release until Q1 of 2026. That means probably March. Oh, it's definitely not March. It's not March. So a year and a half after release, we get one new class. Absolutely no shot we get a second class. I don't understand where they're getting that information from. Here's the thing. Dude, honestly, a little bit of skepticism, definitely fair. I mean, dude, they never said they're going to add in a second class. We're purely speculating. And not to mention, so are the devs. The devs are speculating because of what I mentioned at the beginning of this post in the community update, them kind of winking at another anniversary event. That is definitely kind of hinting at a year 3. If the devs had year 3 in mind, a second class is pretty easy to, suggest, to be honest. I mean, yeah, honestly, what if they did have a year 3? What else would they really do? DLC? Maybe. I mean, I'd be down for that. That actually sounds pretty cool. But like, DLC for campaign, bring in some more operations. That sounds fair. I agree. That's something year 3 could definitely do. But if they didn't have all of that resources, if they don't have all of the time in the world to, you know, do a DLC, a class is probably the other best option, to be completely honest. But okay, I don't want to hype up anyone about a year 3. That is theoretical and may not happen. I was just pointing out the devs were, you know, hinting at it. It's a thing they would like to do if possible, I imagine, is what they're getting at. However, March, no shot. Here's the release schedule for the roadmap. So we're gonna have a patch in November, and then next would be December, no patch, and then January. January is Techmarine. That is patch 12 right there. The devs mentioned, you know, basically every main patch is going to have a month in between, and we're currently in between patch 10 and patch 11. So when patch 11 drops in November, December would be the skip month, where there's probably not going to be a lot going on. Also, yeah, holidays and everything. Yeah, that's could be a slow month for December, but we will see. But yeah, then January. That's patch 12. It's probably going to be either halfway through January or later in the month for January, but I don't see any evidence to suggest that it will be in March. I don't understand that. Yeah, they said Techmarine's patch 12, I believe, right? If that's the case, then yeah, patch 12 is January. I imagine Apothecary, from what I've learned, it sounds like Psyker abilities won't be added based on the language of the devs, so librarians would be ruled out. I mean, in that case, you could definitely rule out Terminators as well. I mean, I just think they're just as awkward to implement. The current chaplain is not well liked, and that's most likely who the character would be unless they extend the story and introduce someone new. Plus, I learned there's only one chaplain per company, so it's an odd class to add if there aren't many. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the Leandros just being like, wow, I don't remember being here, like, for every mission is gonna be so funny. But... No, so poor Leandros just getting dragged to every mission, and then he also has to go back to the battle barge to question Titus. Dude, man, that guy is busy. Judicar has no hope, but as I've learned about them, they sound like they would be a class I'd love. Yeah, that's fair. I was just kind of looking at it from a perspective of what would be the easiest to add. I mean, honestly, it's probably Apothecary. Like, you don't even have to really think too hard about the Apothecary's abilities. Not to mention the team perks for the Apothecary could be genuinely the strongest team perks in the game. Like, what if it was, like, you know, spawn in with an extra stim as a team perk? That would be pretty good, even though it would be useless for the rest of the mission. That's basically what would happen. But yeah, other, you know, like maybe Adrenaline Rush for your team. That would be kind of cool. Whenever they execute a major, they get a little bit of health back. That would be cool. I would like to see that. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff with Apothecary that could be very fun. I do like support classes, especially in action games like this, where, like, yeah, as Sniper, it's very fun to go in a camo, pick up your teammate quicker than anybody, because there is Medicae Adept, that perk for Sniper, where you can get fast reses. Yeah, you know, mix that with camo. Pick up your teammate, you have squad renewal, so you and your teammate can get cooldown back on headshots. There's a lot of cool support stuff in this game that I think is very, very fun. But like the Apothecary could take it to the next level to the point where it could be a little bit too strong. Dude, okay, yeah, I've seen a lot of people talking about they really don't think that we're gonna get a second class, and I just have to admit, I too see that as unlikely. However, it really doesn't hurt to kind of theorize if this is possible, because, I mean, to be honest, there was a time for Space Marine 2, when it launched and a couple months in, where the idea of them adding a new class was also impossible. It was also not likely. Dude, I honestly can't remember, but like I've had so many comments just telling me there's no way they're gonna add another class into this game. There's no more content, yada yada yada. And then now we're on year 2. So I don't know. Here's the truth. We don't know the whole story. We can speculate. However, it's always good to ground your speculation so you're not disappointed. So yeah, it's fun to talk about a second class, but I honestly do think the devs can pull it off. I just think I'm not too sure if it's on their docket yet. It's not a priority. I imagine if they needed to add in a second class to the game for whatever reason, they would definitely wait to confirm a year 3 or something like that, for sure.